The Cape Flats region, situated on the outskirts of Cape Town, South Africa, is a challenging environment. It is plagued by poverty, gang activity, and substance abuse problems. Valhalla Park and Hines Park, neighborhoods located on the flatlands southeast of the city center, are home to both ordinary families striving to make the best of their circumstances and dangerous gangs vying for money, power, and control. Against this backdrop, a young man named Cameron Wilson grew up. Despite being only 17 years old, Cameron embarked on a reign of terror that instilled fear in the communities of the Cape Flats. Possessing a cold-blooded ruthlessness beyond his years, Cameron showed no mercy as he committed acts of rape, murder, and assault within a few short years. He displayed a complete lack of remorse for even the most gruesome crimes he committed. Cameron attacked without warning or provocation, without any discernible pattern or preference for his violence. His victims spanned across genders, ages, and had no clear connections to each other. He killed impulsively and also engaged in prolonged acts of torture, motivated by money, power, or simply his own sadistic pleasure. With an instinct for killing that seemed to flow through his veins, Cameron had the potential to become one of the most infamous serial killers and violent offenders South Africa had ever witnessed. Cameron Wilson carried out his first documented attack in October 2014, setting off a series of violent crimes. On that day, the 17-year-old Cameron brutally stabbed a man named Alfonso van Rooyen to death, following a heated confrontation between the two. Alfonso, 22 years old at the time, was walking along a winding street in Valhalla Park on his way to visit his grandmother. Although the neighborhood could be dangerous, Alfonso had taken that route almost daily without any incidents. However, on that particular day, residents peered out of their windows upon hearing the commotion and shouting in the street below. Cameron swiftly approached Alfonso, grasped his shoulder, and forcefully turned him around. Without hesitation, Cameron thrust a knife deep into Alfonso's chest, leaving him to bleed out on the pavement. Despite several members of the public witnessing the attack, most were too intimidated to come forward. This was because Cameron's father held a prominent position within the 28th prison gang, one of South Africa's most notorious and dangerous gangs. Witnesses dreaded potential retribution not only from Cameron but also from his father and other gang members. This apprehension was justified, as just 3 days after Alfonso's murder, Toyher Stober, a man who had witnessed Cameron killing Alfonso, was fatally shot. Toyher Stober was a highly respected community member who operated a shop from his residence alongside his wife. He was known for his diligent work ethic, honesty, and commitment to providing for his family. Toyher kept to himself and had no knowledge of Cameron or his capabilities. On the day of his demise, Toyher noticed Cameron Wilson entering his store. Recognizing Cameron as the individual who had murdered Alfonso, Toyher requested that Cameron leave his shop, wanting no involvement with him. This led to a heated argument outside the store, and eventually Cameron fled on foot, with Toyher trailing behind in his car, presumably to ascertain Cameron's whereabouts and alert the police. However, mere minutes after Toyher had entered his car and began following Cameron Wilson, concerned neighbors rushed to inform Toyher's wife that her husband had been shot dead just a short distance away. Witnesses informed his wife that Cameron was the perpetrator, yet once again, no one was willing to provide a statement or testify against Cameron Wilson due to fear of retaliation. The police encountered difficulties in building a case against Cameron due to the lack of cooperation from witnesses. This lack of accountability enabled Cameron to continue his violent crimes without facing any consequences. The culture of silence and fear surrounding his actions possibly fueled his brutal instincts even further, leading to more atrocities in the Cape Flats community. Cameron Wilson, feeling empowered by his ability to escape punishment for his initial 2 murders, embarked on a spree of horrifying violence and depravity over the following 2 years. The residents of Cape Flats lived in constant fear as Cameron repeatedly launched sudden, remorseless, and non-hesitant attacks. In December 2014, just 2 months after killing Toyher Stober, Cameron brutally murdered 20-year-old Ernest Erasmus in a chilling Christmas Day assault. Ernest and his girlfriend had been at a tavern in Hines Park, Cape Town, where they bought a small bag of cannabis before heading home. Upon realizing they had lost the bag, they retraced their steps to find it. It was then that Cameron, appearing out of nowhere on his bicycle, demanded money from Ernest. When Ernest claimed he had nothing to offer, Cameron callously took out a screwdriver and stabbed Ernest in the neck, leaving him to bleed out on the sidewalk as Cameron swiftly rode away. 4 months later, in April 2015, Cameron's violent rampage continued with attacks on 2 more victims in separate incidents. The first victim was 20-year-old Cody Philander, who, along with a friend, was accosted by Cameron demanding to search Cody's backpack. When Cody refused, Cameron flew into a rage, brandishing a knife and stabbing Cody in the chest before fleeing. Despite sustaining critical injuries, Cody survived the assault. Later that same month, 17-year-old Dawnie Davids fell prey to Cameron's violence. Dawnie was walking home alone, across an open field after visiting a friend when she encountered Cameron's cousin. Dawnie was acquainted with Cameron's cousin, who lived in the same area, and they had a friendly relationship. Therefore, Dawnie felt no reason to be afraid. As they strolled across the field, they engaged in conversation, and everything appeared to be normal. However, the situation took a horrifying turn when Cameron suddenly appeared and forcefully grabbed Dawnie. He forcibly took the terrified girl away from the populated streets and houses to a secluded area. There, he coerced his cousin into attacking Dawnie by kicking her, before instructing him to leave. Dawnie pleaded with Cameron, desperately asking him to release her and demanding an explanation for his actions. Unfortunately, Cameron disregarded her pleas and proceeded to sexually assault the young girl. Once Cameron had finished his sadistic act, Dawnie saw an opportunity to escape and broke free from his grasp, running as fast as she could. However, Cameron swiftly caught up to her and brutally stabbed her in the back of her neck before fleeing the scene, leaving her for dead. Dawnie was immediately rushed to the hospital and miraculously survived the horrifying ordeal. However, she was left deeply traumatized and struggled to cope with the psychological impact of the unprovoked attack. Despite Dawnie's survival and ability to identify Cameron as her attacker, he remained at large and continued his violent spree. The reasons behind his lack of arrest following this attack are unclear, but it is possible that witnesses were uncooperative and feared retaliation from Cameron and his father's gang. Cameron's attacks appeared to be completely random, targeting victims of various ages and genders. The community lived in constant fear, yet Cameron Wilson continued to evade justice, leaving a trail of devastation and trauma in his wake. In April 2015, Cameron committed one of his most heinous and chilling crimes when he raped and murdered 16-year-old Stacey Mohal. Stacey and her 16-year-old friend Abigail were walking home from school when they were approached by Cameron and his 13-year-old accomplice. Initially, the encounter appeared harmless, but it swiftly took a sinister turn when Cameron brandished a firearm and coerced the terrified girls to accompany him further into a secluded area. Once isolated and vulnerable, Cameron proceeded to sexually assault both Stacey and Abigail while his 13-year-old accomplice stood watch. Following the acts of sexual violence, Cameron handed his accomplice a knife and instructed him to stab the girls. Subsequently, the assailants placed gasoline-filled tires around the girls' necks and ignited them, a brutal act known as necklacing. While this form of vigilante justice is often seen in South Africa, in this instance, it served as a method of torture and murder. As if the necklacing wasn't enough, the attackers also subjected the girls to a barrage of rocks and bricks, inflicting further harm and trauma. Left to burn alive, the girls writhed in excruciating agony as the flames consumed them. Stacey endured a harrowing death, suffering multiple stab wounds and severe burns across her body. The post-mortem examination revealed the unimaginable pain and torment she endured in her final moments. Remarkably, despite her injuries, Abigail miraculously survived this barbaric assault. She displayed immense courage by identifying Cameron Wilson as the primary perpetrator, along with his 13-year-old accomplice. Despite the community's fear of testifying or implicating Cameron Wilson, Abigail exhibited exceptional bravery. She positively identified Cameron as one of their attackers and ensured his arrest for his heinous crimes. However, inexplicably, despite Abigail's eyewitness testimony and the compelling evidence against him, Cameron was released on bail shortly after his arrest. The decision to grant Cameron bail elicited shock and outrage from the community, as many questioned how someone capable of such a monstrous act could be allowed to walk free. There were differing opinions regarding Cameron's release on bail. Some argued that it demonstrated his untouchable status, while others speculated that his father's affiliation with the 28's gang and the fear he instilled in the community played a role. The true reason behind Cameron's release remains unclear, but what is certain is that it proved to be a catastrophic mistake. Throughout 2016, Cameron Wilson continued his violent spree, committing further crimes and inflicting more harm on the community. Over the following months, numerous complaints and reports of attacks by Cameron flooded the local police stations. One of his victims was a 22-year-old woman whom he assaulted after she refused to give him her lighter. While walking alone, the woman was approached by Cameron, who asked for a lighter. When she informed him that she didn't have one, he flew into a rage and launched a brutal attack, repeatedly punching and kicking her until she lost consciousness. In another incident, Cameron robbed a man at knife point and proceeded to stab him in the chest when he resisted. The man, who was walking alone at night, was accosted by Cameron. Threatening him with a knife, Cameron demanded the man's belongings. Initially complying, the man handed over his wallet and phone. However, when Cameron demanded his watch as well, the man refused and attempted to fight back. This enraged Cameron, prompting him to stab the man in the chest before fleeing the scene with his stolen items. The man was rushed to the hospital and fortunately survived the attack, although he sustained serious injuries. One of Cameron's most vicious assaults was on a woman who was walking alone. Approaching her, Cameron began viciously beating her with a hammer, resulting in skull fractures and other severe injuries. Left for dead, the woman was fortunately discovered by a passerby who promptly called for help. She was swiftly transported to the medical facility and underwent an urgent surgical procedure to preserve her life. The assault was entirely unprovoked and served as a stark reminder of Cameron's complete disregard for the value of human life. It appeared that he derived pleasure from causing pain and suffering to others, and his acts of violence were escalating in severity. In September 2016, Cameron Wilson committed the heinous crime that would ultimately lead to his downfall: the savage rape and murder of 18-year-old Lakita Moore. On the evening of September 10, 2016, Lakita informed her father that she was attending a birthday celebration of a friend. Little did he know that it would be the last time he would see his daughter alive. The following morning, a woman walking her dog in a field near 8th Avenue stumbled upon Lakita's lifeless body. The young woman was found completely unclothed, her body bearing numerous stab wounds. Subsequent investigation revealed that Lakita had been brutally stabbed a shocking 98 times, with multiple wounds inflicted upon her chest, back, and abdomen. Her face had been mercilessly beaten, her jaw shattered, and most horrifyingly, her breasts and genitals had been brutally mutilated. Certain parts of her intimate anatomy had been gruesomely sliced away. The presence of blood spatter indicated a frenzied attack. It appeared that Lakita had desperately attempted to escape, but her assailant pursued and forcibly returned her to the scene of the murder. Drag marks, along with defensive wounds on Lakita's hands, painted a harrowing picture of a prolonged and agonizing struggle, with Lakita valiantly fighting for her life. As news of Lakita's murder spread throughout the community, shock and sorrow quickly transformed into anger and despair. Her family and friends were left devastated by the unfathomable cruelty of her death. Lakita's mother fell into a state of catatonia and required sedation. Her father was so overwhelmed that he could not bring himself to identify her body. The task was undertaken by Lakita's aunt, who nearly collapsed upon witnessing the extent of her niece's brutalization. Driven to apprehend Lakita's killer, detectives initiated interviews with her loved ones and acquaintances. Lakita's 16-year-old sister, Marcia, was one of the first individuals they interviewed. Marcia provided crucial information that would ultimately lead investigators straight to Cameron Wilson. It was revealed that Lakita and Cameron had known each other for quite some time prior to her tragic murder. In fact, Cameron happened to be Marcia's boyfriend's cousin. He frequently visited the Moore household to spend time with his cousin, and it was during these visits that he initially met Lakita. Initially, their interactions appeared to be friendly, but as time went on, Cameron's interest in Lakita became increasingly obsessive. According to Marcia's account, in the weeks leading up to Lakita's murder, Cameron relentlessly pursued her. He bombarded her with explicit text messages and even resorted to threats when she refused to date him. Marcia recounted a chilling incident that occurred the day before Lakita's death. An enraged Cameron forcefully entered their home and grabbed Lakita, holding a knife to her throat. He warned her of the consequences she would face if she continued to reject him. On the day of her murder, Cameron once again appeared at the Moore residence uninvited and clearly under the influence. He confronted Lakita and warned her against attending the party that night, expressing his disapproval of her being around other guys. Despite feeling shaken, Lakita remained determined not to let Cameron's threats control her life. She made the decision to still attend the party, unaware of the tragic outcome that awaited her. Marcia informed detectives that she had also been present at the same party on the night of Lakita's death. They arrived at around 8 p.m., and the Valhalla Park Civic Center was already bustling with young people dancing and socializing. Lakita quickly located her friends and joined them, exchanging hugs and laughter. Shortly after, Cameron Wilson arrived uninvited. He immediately sought out Lakita and attempted to separate her from the crowd to talk. Witnesses reported that Cameron appeared agitated and angry, forcefully grabbing Lakita's arm and shouting at her over the loud music. Lakita appeared visibly shaken and tried to break free from his grasp. Marcia observed the commotion and swiftly intervened. She positioned herself between Cameron and Lakita, instructing Cameron to cease his harassment of her sister. A heated argument ensued, with Cameron disregarding Marcia's objections and shouting over her. At one point, he forcefully pushed Marcia aside and seized Lakita by her hair, attempting to drag her towards the exit. The escalating situation caught the attention of other party-goers who promptly stepped in to assist. A group of Lakita's male friends confronted Cameron, forcefully pushing him away from Lakita and demanding that he leave. Filled with rage, Cameron shouted over the music, claiming ownership of Lakita and threatening to treat her as he pleased. He stormed out of the party, casting a menacing glare at Lakita as he departed. Later in the evening, witnesses reported seeing Cameron re-enter the party and engage in conversation with Lakita. They noted that Lakita appeared distressed but resigned, and after a tense exchange, she reluctantly left the party with Cameron. Marcia, who had vigilantly watched over her sister throughout the night, grew alarmed upon seeing Lakita leave with Cameron. She swiftly caught up to them outside and confronted Cameron, demanding to know where he was taking her sister. According to Marcia's subsequent testimony, Cameron appeared agitated and defensive when she approached them. He informed Marcia that he and Lakita were merely going to a nearby liquor store to purchase box wine, asserting that it was none of her concern. Marcia found this explanation peculiar, as the liquor stores would have been closed at that late hour. Sensing that something was amiss, Marcia pleaded with Lakita not to accompany Cameron. She reminded her sister of Cameron's previous threats and controlling behavior, urging her to return inside where it was safe. However, Lakita, perhaps reluctant to cause a scene or underestimating the danger she faced, dismissed Marcia's concerns. She reassured her sister that she would be fine and would return shortly. Lakita instructed Marcia to go back inside and enjoy the remainder of the party. Marcia, still filled with unease, implored Lakita to make a promise, to call her immediately if anything happened or if she needed any assistance. Lakita, understanding the gravity of the situation, agreed to Marcia's request and then departed into the darkness of the night alongside Cameron. Little did Marcia know, this would be the final time she would lay eyes on her beloved sister. In the years to come, Marcia would carry an immense burden of regret, wishing she had done more to prevent Lakita from leaving with Cameron that fateful night. The weight of guilt would haunt her relentlessly. The police investigation revealed a harrowing sequence of events. It is believed that after leaving the party with Lakita, Cameron took her to a desolate field near 8th Avenue. It was in that very location where he subjected her to unspeakable acts of rape and murder, inflicting hours of unimaginable torment upon her. Despite Lakita's valiant resistance, she was ultimately overpowered by the sheer rage of her assailant. Cameron callously abandoned Lakita's battered and lifeless body in that field, treating her like a discarded object. As he calmly walked away from the scene, a trail of blood and horror marked his departure. The brutality of Lakita Moore's murder alone was enough to send shockwaves through the Cape Flats community. However, the devastation did not end there. The following day, September 11th, 2016, brought another heart-wrenching blow. A passerby stumbled upon the lifeless body of 20-year-old Xavier Bester in a nearby field, not far from where Lakita had met her tragic end. Xavier, a neighbor of the Moore family, resided in the area with his mother and sister. He was known to have some connection with both Lakita and Cameron Wilson. Rumors circulated among the residents, suggesting a romantic involvement between Xavier and Lakita, although her family vehemently denied such claims. Detectives investigating the case noted the chilling similarities between Xavier's murder and Lakita's. Like Lakita, Xavier had suffered multiple stab wounds and was left abandoned in a secluded area. The close proximity of the two crime scenes, coupled with the timing of the murders, raised suspicions of a possible connection between the two cases. As the investigators delved deeper into the matter, a disturbing theory began to take shape. Following the revelations of Lakita Moore and Xavier Bester's deaths, the pressure on law enforcement to capture Cameron Wilson intensified. Detectives worked diligently to collect evidence and construct a case against him, recognizing the significant danger he posed to the community. After an extensive search, Cameron was eventually located and taken into custody on September 12, 2016. Upon his arrest, he displayed a lack of remorse or worry, smirking at officers and appearing almost entertained by the situation. Despite the growing evidence against him, Cameron continued to assert his innocence regarding all the charges brought against him. For each murder accusation, he provided a different narrative or alibi. Cameron contended that on the night of Lakita Moore's murder, he had been at home with his mother, watching movies and playing video games. His mother, Sylvia Wilson, staunchly defended him, claiming he had been with her the entire evening and could not have committed the crime. When confronted with eyewitness testimonies placing him at the party with Lakita and leaving with her just before her death, Cameron altered his story. He now alleged that, although he was with Lakita that night, it was actually his friend, Xavier Bester, who had killed her in a jealous rage. Cameron asserted that he had attempted to intervene, but was unsuccessful in preventing the murder. Concerning the murder of Alfonso Van Rooyen, Cameron stated that he was in a different area of town at the time, visiting a friend. He maintained that he had no reason to harm Alfonso, and that the witnesses who identified him were mistaken. In the case of Stacy, Cameron's alibi was that he was at a family gathering when the crime took place. He suggested that the authorities investigate Stacy's boyfriend as a potential suspect, mentioning rumors of domestic violence he had heard. Cameron's response to the testimony of his 13-year-old accomplice was to shift the blame onto the young boy, claiming that it was he who had committed the murder of Stacy. In regards to the killing of Toy Herstober, Cameron denied ever meeting the victim and accused the police of fabricating evidence against him, asserting that he was being framed for a crime he did not commit. Initially, Cameron claimed to have been out of town visiting relatives when Ernest Erasmus was murdered. However, when presented with evidence placing him at the scene, he changed his story, alleging that he had acted in self-defense after being attacked by Ernest. The sheer number of alibis and contradictory statements provided by Cameron strained credibility, leading investigators to doubt his claims. It seemed highly unlikely that he could have been in multiple places at the time of the murders, or that so many people would have motives to frame him. As the investigation progressed, the extent of Cameron's alleged crimes became apparent. He faced a total of 15 charges, including 5 counts of murder, as well as rape, attempted murder, assault, and illegal possession of firearms. Throughout his court appearances, Cameron displayed a dismissive attitude, laughing, rolling his eyes, and making sarcastic comments, showing no remorse for the lives he had destroyed or the pain he had caused to numerous families. Despite overwhelming evidence against him, Cameron smirked and pleaded not guilty to each count when the charges were read. In June 2017, after a lengthy and emotionally charged trial, Cameron Wilson was found guilty of 13 out of the 15 charges brought against him, including 5 counts of murder, attempted murder, rape, and illegal possession of firearms. The courtroom was filled with family members of the victims who wept and comforted each other as the verdict was announced. For many, it was a moment of mixed emotions. Justice had been served, yet it could never resurrect their beloved ones. As the judge declared the guilty verdicts, the audience erupted in a whirlwind of emotions. Some shed tears of relief, while others angrily shouted at Cameron, branding him a monster and a coward. Amidst the pandemonium, Cameron began to applaud slowly, a smirk spreading across his face before he turned, remarking that at least he was still alive. For the 5 counts of murder, Cameron received 5 life sentences. Additionally, he was handed an extra 15 years for the attempted murder of Ernest Erasmus, as well as several years for each rape and illegal possession of firearms charge. In total, Cameron Wilson was sentenced to 5 life terms, plus an additional 71 years behind bars. The judge made it explicitly clear that these sentences would run concurrently, implying that Cameron Wilson could be eligible for parole after a mere 25 years. For a man who had committed such atrocious crimes and displayed no remorse, the possibility of release seemed excessively lenient. Furthermore, there was frustration and anger over the fact that several other crimes Cameron was suspected of committing never made it to trial. Investigators had uncovered evidence linking him to at least 3 more murders and several rapes, but crucial witnesses were too terrified to testify against him, fearing retaliation from Cameron's associates. As Cameron was escorted out of the courtroom, he turned to face the audience one final time. With a taunting grin, he blew a kiss to the crowd, reveling in their anguish and disbelief.